What exactly is insulin resistance? Many people have heard of it, they know it's a serious issue, but just how big of a problem is it? Where does it come from? Is insulin something harmful? Today we're going to break it all down so that you not only understand it for yourself, but can also help others grasp it. Because insulin resistance is one of the most pressing health concerns in the world. Insulin resistance is exactly what it sounds like. The body's cells becoming resistant to insulin. Insulin itself is not harmful. In fact, it has been essential for survival since life began. Its main function is to regulate storage during times of excess. When food is plentiful, insulin allows the body to store nutrients for future use. Insulin is an anabolic hormone, meaning it promotes growth and storage. It facilitates the building of tissues, muscles, and fat reserves to prepare for times of scarcity. In a balanced system, this mechanism allows for energy storage when needed, and its later release when food is scarce. However, issues arise when this process is disrupted. The food we eat is broken down into fuel and building blocks for the body. Insulin plays a major role in both, particularly in regulating blood sugar. When we eat carbohydrates, blood sugar rises. Then there is an enormous response of insulin, and insulin is required to move that glucose into the cells partly as fuel, but most of it is converted into fat where it can be used for energy or stored for later use. Insulin acts like a key, unlocking the cells so glucose can enter. This is a tightly controlled process, as excess glucose in the bloodstream is harmful. Insulin helps to store any extra glucose, primarily by converting it into fat. While carbohydrates trigger a very significant insulin response, protein also stimulates insulin to a moderate degree since it contributes to tissue growth and repair. However, fat has almost no impact on insulin levels because it does not require conversion for storage. It is already in a usable form as fuel. Blood sugar levels are maintained within a very narrow range. After eating, blood sugar typically stays between 80 and 120 milligrams per deciliter. And when fasting, it should be between 75 and 95 milligrams per deciliter. At any given moment, there is only about 1 teaspoon of sugar circulating in the bloodstream. Any excess must be stored, and this is where insulin comes into play. The body tightly regulates blood sugar because excess glucose is toxic, particularly to the brain. Without insulin, blood sugar can skyrocket, leading to coma. Conversely, too much insulin can cause blood sugar to drop dangerously low, also resulting in coma. The body requires steady, controlled fuel, similar to burning a log for a consistent heat source, while carbohydrates are more like you throwing gasoline into the fire as fuel, which burns quickly and intensely. Under normal conditions, cells use glucose for energy. When necessary, excess glucose is converted into fat for storage. However, when excessive amounts of carbohydrates are consumed, especially frequently throughout the day, the system becomes overwhelmed. With constant carbohydrate intake and frequent meals, glucose levels remain elevated. As a result, the body continues producing insulin to push the glucose into cells. Over time, cells become overloaded with glucose and fat. At this point, they begin resisting insulin signals, refusing to take in more glucose. The pancreas compensates by producing even more insulin in an attempt to force the glucose into the already full cells. This creates a vicious cycle: more glucose, more insulin, and increasing resistance. This is how insulin resistance develops. Several factors contribute to insulin resistance. While a high carbohydrate intake raises glucose levels, many traditional diets have included carbohydrates without causing widespread insulin resistance. The issue intensifies with frequent eating and excessive sugar consumption. Sugar is particularly problematic because it consists of 50% glucose and 50% fructose. While glucose is used by all cells in the body, fructose is processed exclusively by the liver. Since the liver is a relatively small organ, the excess fructose creates a significant burden, leading to fat accumulation in the liver itself. This accelerates insulin resistance dramatically. Refined sugar, added to processed foods, condiments, and beverages, delivers far more fructose than the body was designed to handle. The problem worsened with the introduction of high fructose corn syrup, which contains an even higher percentage of fructose, further straining the liver and exacerbating insulin resistance. One of the best ways to assess insulin resistance is by measuring hemoglobin A1C, which provides an average blood sugar level over 3 to 4 months. Below 5.3%, optimal, indicating insulin sensitivity. 5.3% to 5.7%, early signs of insulin resistance. 5.7% to 6.4%, pre-diabetic. 6.5% or higher, diabetic. Current estimates indicate that around 20% of the population is diabetic, while approximately 30% are pre-diabetic. However, considering obesity rates and lifestyle factors, the true number of individuals with some degree of insulin resistance is likely much higher. Somewhere around 80% of the population have mild to severe insulin resistance or diabetes. If left unaddressed, insulin resistance leads to weight gain, high blood pressure, an increased risk of stroke, and a greater likelihood of cardiovascular disease, the leading causes of death today. The sooner insulin resistance is recognized and addressed, the better the outcome. Many mainstream recommendations for managing insulin resistance miss the mark. Guidelines often emphasize eating low-fat foods, whole grains, carbohydrates, and fruits all year round, yet all of these approaches can actually worsen insulin resistance. Exercise is beneficial, as it allows muscles to absorb glucose with less insulin, but it alone cannot resolve insulin resistance. The key factor is food. However, many official health recommendations fail to address the impact of sugar, processed foods, carbohydrates, and frequent eating patterns when it comes to insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is a storage issue. The cells are already overloaded with fuel, and insulin prevents access to stored energy. Yet conventional treatments often focus on increasing insulin levels further through medication, which only forces more glucose into already full cells, worsening the problem in the long run. Understanding insulin resistance is critical because it underlies many of the most common health issues today. The more people become aware of its true causes, the better equipped they will be to take control of their health.